Good morning or afternoon, whichever time zone you're on, to all who are here. This is Earthbound Live, a conversation with Carolyn Crane, who I'm delighted to have with us. Carolyn is one of those people who has done a lot of things that I find fascinating. She's a journalist and an educator. She lives in rural Southeast Michigan on land she rewilded and calls Whimsy Farm, and we'll get to that because I'm really interested in that. She teaches English at community colleges, hosts a bi-monthly podcast, also called Whimsy Farm, focusing on environmental and social justice, and is at work on a biography of the folk singer Utah Phillips, folk singer and activist Utah Phillips, for Monthly Review Press. And she says she's been buoyed by nature since her earliest days in California, where she lived first by the Pacific and later in the Tahoe National Forest. So, welcome, Carolyn, to Earthbound Live, and I'm just thrilled to have you. I want to start with what terraphilia means to you. Just a quick.
Well, thank you for having me, Susan. And thank you for inventing the word terraphilia along with your late husband, Richard. I really am grateful because we needed that word. And I've been thinking about terraphilia and what it means to me since I first heard the word when I read your book, Bless the Birds. And I think it boils down to participation for me,
Mm,
participating in the earth, with the earth,
mhm.
getting down with it, in it, understanding it, thinking about its needs separate to your own needs, being centric, learning from it, keeping pace with it. And
Mhm.
all that boils down to participation.
Yeah,
It's an active relationship with the earth.
that's a great way to say it. Participation in an active relationship with the earth. I'm looking at myself on the screen and realizing that my feed is a little slow, so my apologies for that. Heaven knows what it is, wildfires here in Colorado, whatever, but just be patient with that. I was thinking as you talked, Carolyn, that that really aligns with Robin Wall Kimmerer's idea of a reciprocal relationship with this earth, of what we're missing is understanding the earth and those many, many lives we share it with, human and more so, as kin, as not resources, but essentially neighbors in the very larger sense. So yeah, participation in this community, this huge global community, um, is a really wonderful way to look at it. And that brings me right to my next question, which is talk to us about Whimsy Farm. How did you end up in rural Southeast Michigan, and how did the idea of Whimsy Farm come up? And this is a lot of questions, I know. And what does it mean to rewild a piece of land?
Okay, so it was 5 years ago that I moved from the Tahoe National Forest
Hmm.
here to Southeast Michigan, a little south of Ann Arbor, about
Hmm.
45 minutes southwest of Detroit. Um, and I did it for personal reasons. I felt like I needed a fresh start,
Hmm.
and it afforded me an easier pace of life.
Mm.
Like you, Susan, I lost my husband to brain cancer.
Yeah,
And like you, I was exhausted
yeah,
when that was over
yeah.
and under a lot of economic burden, under a lot of stress from the fires in the Tahoe National
Mm.
Forest.
Hmm.
And my oldest son at the time was in graduate school here at University of Michigan, just up the road. And he and his wife said, "Why don't you come live near us?"
Mm.
And my younger two had left the Tahoe National Forest area. So I had no family
Yeah,
really in the area. And my younger two weren't settled yet. They were
yeah.
still figuring out what they were going to do. And they totally supported my move. In fact, one of them drove me and my dogs across country.
Sweet.
And I got to rest for a while,
Yeah,
which I desperately needed.
yeah.
And I didn't really have a particular agenda. I had a modest 2.5 acre place I'd bought that abuts the Saline River. My property doesn't go quite down to the river, but close, and I have ability to walk down to the river whenever I want. So I sat with the land for a year, and I really believe in doing that when I move to new
Yeah.
land and see how the seasons change, how
Yeah.
the light changes, what the earth
Yeah.
needs throughout the seasons.
Yeah.
And I've always loved farming and gardening. So my first plan was that I was going to grow food because that's always a good thing to do.
Hmm.
Uh, but then I was having some trouble with the climate is so different than the dry seasons of the Tahoe
Hmm.
National Forest. And there's also lots of farmers around who know how to do that, including the wonderful Sheets Produce in my town where I get my CSA. And at the same time, I saw an ad on social media blurb for taking a rain garden class. And I thought, well, I had no idea what a rain garden was. And I thought, well, rains a lot here and I want a garden, so that can't be bad.
Yeah.
So I signed up and learned what a rain garden was, which is, for those who don't know, a garden you create on your property that takes the rainfall from your roof into
Right.
a pool, basically, cleanses that water. So, and very important in more urban areas where that water is
Right.
going into the watershed drainage in the sewer. So, because roofs are toxic, the water's toxic coming off a roof. So, I happen to have a roof and a scar on my property from where an above ground pool had
Uh,
been removed before I bought it. And it so happened that it was exactly the right size for a rain
Perfect.
garden.
Perfect.
So
Love it.
I have a huge rain garden. And meanwhile, I started learning about native plants and
Right.
rewilding and looking at my 2.5 acre lawn and thinking, it was very pretty and I miss it. And I love
Really?
looking at other people's lawns. But I also felt like it was anthropocentric rather than biocentric. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
doing anybody any good.
Right.
And a farm biologist came to visit me during this time, and I love the way she put it. She said, lawns are fantastic habitats for people,
Yeah.
but if you're not using it, let someone else use it.
Yeah. That's a great
So
way to
I
put it.
killed it.
Yeah.
I killed all 2.5 acres of it and planted in the front seeds and grasses, native seeds and grasses, and it took off much better than anyone thought it would. So it's now a jungle, a 6 foot jungle of wild bergamot and echinacea and coneflower and yarrow and big blue lobelia and native grasses and sedges, and it's very jungly. And then in the back, I started planting a food forest with elderflowers and hazelnuts and persimmons, wild strawberries. And the reason I call this place Whimsy Farm is because all that happened very whimsically.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Okay.
I didn't have an agenda. I
Yeah.
listened. I listened to my land.
Yeah.
And I have so many birds here now, and they greet me when I come out the door. And I say, "You're welcome,"
Yeah. Yeah.
because they have this amazing playground. And I love it that they say hello to me when I
Oh, they're
open the
thrilled. I'm
front
sure.
door.
I'm sure they're thrilled. So it sounds to me like, and I haven't seen other than one picture of you standing in front of your rain garden in the back, I believe. It sounds to me like what you have in front is basically a tall grass prairie. You've basically recreated a tall grass prairie as best one
It's a
can.
it's a
In
1 acre tall grass and
Yeah,
flowers, lots of
yeah.
flowers.
Well, a tall grass prairie has, the flowers are a big part of it. And do you have someone bush hog it or mow it once a year or something like that, or how do you maintain that front?
I have not done that yet, and that's an excellent question. I worked with the conservation district in my county
Mm-hmm.
to, they gave me some mini grants to help me, and I got my statewide certification, which is called MEAP, which stands for Michigan Agricultural Environmental Assurance Program. So, working with those groups, we've strategized different possibilities. One, mowing is okay, but not the best. What I'd
Yeah.
like to do is, which I've seen, which was all over the place in California, but not so much here in Southeast Michigan, where one can rent goats
Mm.
and they will bring goats. And what the conservation district recommended was to do a third a season
Oh, right.
so that
Right.
it's in different which
Yeah.
is better for the native insects. Others have recommended a controlled burn, which I will look into for next spring. One of the reasons I've held off, though, Susan, is because there's trees growing
Hmm.
and native trees that have just sprung up as volunteers, redbuds I've planted, pawpaws I've planted, and I want to let them grow. I don't want to accidentally mow
Right.
them. I want them to get a chance. But next spring, I will be dealing with either a controlled burn or somehow finding goats and starting to do the a third. And if I can't do either of those, I will mow.
Yeah. So I'm gonna comment about that just because I've done tallgrass prairie burns for the Nature Conservancy when we lived briefly in Iowa, um, and it, they're on a small acreage. It's harder because you have to be careful about not losing the fire. You don't want it to get away, but and you'd have to time them super carefully so that you're giving uh, any kind of insects who are overwintering or in chrysalis a chance to finish their life cycles before you do it. So it can be a tricky timing thing. But what burning does, for those who are listening, is it recycles the nutrients that are standing above ground now back into the soil by turning them into ash. So that's probably of your options ecologically for a tallgrass prairie the best. Um, and you can, but the trees, that's going to be an issue with the trees you planted, the pawpaws and that kind of thing. If you leave those trees, you will eventually have a woodland instead of a prairie, and it won't take that long. So that's one thing to think about in your mind as you're doing it. And then the goats are great because they do a similar recycling. It's not quite as efficient as burning, but because they munch and poop and trample with their little hooves, what you do is give give make little depressions in the soil where seeds and also rainwater can accumulate, and the goat scat becomes like fertilizer. So you're doing a similar sort of thing. And if you're having goats grazing, you're going to have to protect your pawpaws and your other trees that you want to save somehow. And you might have to do that with chicken wire or something like that. Because goats, once they get going, you've seen them, I'm sure, in California, in the Sierra where they were grazing. Once they get going, they just eat everything. They're great about that, but that's also a drawback. So
They are not discriminate. You're right. And
they are
that's
completely
exactly what
not
I'm going
discriminating.
through. And I feel like I'd rather do the fire because it's most closely mimics nature itself. And prairie fires are a natural part of
Yeah,
life. I don't have many trees planted, but for the biodiversity and the
yeah,
beauty, I wanted a
yeah.
couple red buds, a couple pawpaws,
Oh,
and
yeah.
some tulip trees
And
in the
some
back.
tulips.
And oh, I have some American sycamores and some bur oaks that have come up. So not a lot of trees, but trees are, heavenly. And
Yeah.
there were only about 10 trees on this property. It was
Wow.
mostly just lawn.
Just lawn.
So
Yeah.
they are some old growth maples though, and
Sweet.
some old growth walnuts, but not a lot of young trees.
Big enough. One thing you can do with trees is wrap their bark with something non-flammable to mimic as they get older, their bark gets to be relatively non-flammable. So a grass fire doesn't get as hot as a forest fire. And especially bur oaks and bigger liriodendrons, tulip trees, and pawpaws can resist a low intensity grass fire. And so one thing to do would be to see if anybody knows of any non-flammable material you could wrap the bark with to protect those trees if you did do a burn. Um, I want to
A
follow
neighbor
up
who
on, go ahead.
rewilded a neighbor who rewilded hired a company to do her controlled burn of her prairie. So that's what I would do. I would not attempt
Yeah,
to do it myself
yeah,
for safety reasons. And so I would imagine I can work through all that. I think the
yes, you
trickiest
could.
thing will be the
Yeah,
timing with
yeah,
time of year and the weather, all the
yeah,
variables.
yeah, yeah. Um, and it's good that there is somebody who has that expertise that you can hire. I will say that it's a lot of fun doing a controlled burn, but it's also pretty adrenaline raising. I want to go back to the rain garden too for listeners who don't know much about rain gardens. When you said roofs are toxic, the runoff is toxic. Um, what happens to cleanse it is a partnership with plants and microbes in the soil. So plant roots have relationships with all sorts of microbial beings, and those microbial beings act like sponges for a lot of our, especially the organic toxins like the asphalt runoff from shingles and that kind of thing. They act like little sponges and they actually chemically bind those toxic compounds, which then are basically stored in the soil in a way that makes them inert over time. So what's cool about rain gardens, especially in urban areas where the runoff is so, it's difficult to control, you have a lot of hard surfaces, all of a sudden you have this flush of runoff, you flood streets, you flood people's basements, and it's also not good quality water. If you can run that through even street side little rain gardens with plants and microbes, they act like tiny basically marshes, which are better than our sewage plants at cleaning water. And they also slow the water down so that it actually infiltrates in the soil. So what you're doing is a fabulous demonstration of how that works on what sounds like a pretty big scale. And that's cool because you're right there at the
And
river where that water is stored.
it's a huge movement
Yeah,
in Southeast Michigan and Lenawee County, Washtenaw County, here in Monroe County. There's classes, several classes. Rain gardens are just very popular here. People are into them, and it's really exciting to see that. Oh,
that's
here's my
great.
friend Marion Barry.
Yes, she just came in. Um, That's rain gardens are such a simple, relatively simple, I want to say, hi, Mariam.
Hi, sorry to be late.
That's all right. Um, we've got other people just hanging out listening, so
Great,
um,
that's what I'll do.
good to see you. I love your poetry, by the way.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet.
Um, so I think that one of the things that I love about rain gardens is it's a really simple way for people to learn a little bit about rewilding, and it's a simple natural technology. You know, we don't think of nature as a technology, but it really is. Natural communities have figured out a lot of really simple but very effective ways to modulate their environment, and we humans are kind of slow on catching up to that, but we're getting there. So good for you.
I like it too that, and I did a big thing here because I could and I felt like it and I was
Mhm.
called to, but a little rain garden can do so much. People
Yeah,
don't have to
yeah.
go all in and get rid of their lawn and do all the stuff I did. Just a little rain garden is not a little thing. It's a
Yeah,
giant thing.
and it's like a gateway drug to rewilding.
It was for me.
I think of it that way. So for folks who are listening, if you have an ordinary house with gutters and downspouts, you can make a depression off of a downspout and fill it with native marsh plants, and that will act like a small rain garden, and it will. For those of us who live in arid environments like I do, what that does is it sends water back into the soil, which cleanses it, and then it goes back into the groundwater table. And it's like refilling your water bank little by little. And that's a huge, huge deal, especially for those of us who live in arid environments. But also, you know, where you are in Southeast Michigan, you've got these incredible rains that you get and an incredible flush of moisture. But then there are periods where it doesn't rain. And so returning that water clean to the water table is super important. Your water actually goes into the ground and refills the Saline River gradually because a river reaches way underground from where we see the above ground flow. Its actual flow reaches way out to the sides. So you're actually participating in ensuring a steady flow for that river by re-infiltrating the water off of your roofs. So cool thing to do. I love it.
Exciting stuff.
It's really exciting stuff because we can all do it. You know, it doesn't take any big technological expertise or a big amount of money or that kind of thing. I want to switch to your book on Utah Phillips. Talk about
Okay.
talk about where the idea came from and where it is and all that stuff.
The idea came from my work as a journalist around the turn of the century. I lived in Nevada City, and which is a foothill town in on the west slope of the Sierra near Tahoe, between Tahoe and Sacramento. And I was a broadcaster and news producer at the community radio station there in Nevada City. And Utah moved there in, I think it was 88 or 89, and was widely known that he was there, and he was very famous by that time, and loves community radio, and was soon a regular visitor at the station. And when I was on the air, I remember quite a few times he would just poke his head in, and I would just wave him in and turn on the mic and let him go. And that was like gold, right? So I interviewed him. I was always sticking a microphone in his face when I'd see him on the street. He liked to stop and talk to people on the street about anything, trains, labor, music, all the stuff he talked about. When I saw him talking to people, I would just get out and walk up and record it. So I got some good footage of him, audio footage. And then in 2003, he decided to give me what he said at the time was the longest and most personal interview he ever gave anyone. And I said, sure. And we did it in 3 one-hour sessions on his deck at his home on Bergham Lane. And I didn't do much with it. I sold a couple little parts of it, but I just got busy. I had little kids. And then I ended up leaving the radio station, meeting my husband, doing all of this stuff. And I saw Utah, I think it was probably 2007. And he said, when are you going to do something with that interview? And I said, soon. But I just it just didn't happen. So then he passed, and my life took two sharp turns for the personal. First, my mother's sickness, and I was one of her caregivers in Arizona. So I was commuting to Arizona constantly. And then right around a couple of years after she passed, my husband was diagnosed. And so I was his caregiver. And that brought me to Michigan in 2021, an exhausted person who said, once I rested, I think I'm going to dust off that old Utah Phillips interview and send it out and see if anyone wants to publish it. And I've just thought that would be it. I would publish the interview if someone would take it. And Monthly Review Press said, we would love to take it, but not in this form. We think he deserves a full-on book, a full-on biography, and we want you to write it. And so what I thought was a quick project is now in its third year.
Yeah.
Because lo and behold, my dear, wonderful Utah Phillips liked to stretch the truth. So when it came to doing a biography, it turns out that I could not go on what he said. So I have been conducting dozens and dozens of oral histories with octogenarians and septuagenarians.
Wow.
It's been incredible. I'm right now focusing on his years in Saratoga and his time at Cafe Lena, talking to people who knew him then. And there's so much to his life. And I think I'm probably about a third done with the whole project, almost half done with the second draft. Wow. And I have a wonderful editor in New York that Monthly Review Press provided, named George, who I couldn't be doing this without George. So shout out to you, George. And it's been the honor of my life, other than being a mom. I would say the biggest honor of my life to be able to be the person who gets to do this. This is the first book about him. He never wanted a biography. He told me that. I know why now, because he was a big fibber.
Let's just say his memory was elastic.
And creative. And
creative.
Utah Phillips is, in a way, a fictional character created by Bruce Phillips.
Yeah.
His public persona, but to such an extreme that it's it was almost a fictional version.
Well, and
So
that's
that's
got to make the
fascinating
biography
terrain.
interesting, though. I mean, that gives you an interesting story to tell in the sense of this is not just a story of Bruce Phillips who made himself into Utah Phillips. This is a story of a person who basically invented himself. And
He
that makes a
literally did.
that makes a
Yes.
fascinating biography. I mean, how many of us have thought, if we could just be just a little different, or we could just shift this story around or whatever. And he really did it. So to me, that makes it even more fascinating.
It is, and the important thing to remember is in that context, he gave so much to our world, so
Yeah.
much to social justice, environmental justice,
Yeah.
those are the things that have always been my jam. So, that was how he did it, but what
Yeah.
he did is also important.
Yeah. I mean, not to diss him for that, just to say, wow, that adds a whole interesting layer to the biography, this idea of human behavior and how, our image of ourselves is always a little distorted by the way our minds work and the way our memory works, but to actually go whole hog on I'm making myself into this person is fascinating, and I think it just adds a really interesting dimension to the story. So good for you. Um, we have 9 more minutes. So I want to know from you. At first, I want to know, is there something else that you want to say about Whimsy Farm or about your Utah Phillips project?
Not that comes to mind in the moment.
Okay.
Your questions have been excellent.
Then I have one more that I want to ask you, and then I want to take a moment because I have one of the four advance review copies of my forthcoming book right here sitting on the table, and I want to show it to our viewing audience, both now and on the replay. So first for you, if you had one thing you think of to help people be grounded and connected to participate in nature in their everyday lives, if you had one sort of practice or tip, what would that be?
To slow down.
Ooh, ooh, yes.
This is something I struggle with every hour of every day because I do a lot and I'm
Mm-hmm,
driven to do a lot.
mm-hmm,
And that doesn't seem to be going away. And I don't really want it to. I love my teaching. I love writing. I love podcasting. I love working on the land. And I can get so excited about all that I'm doing that I almost feel racy. And it's important to breathe, 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 and
mm-hmm.
slow down because that's when nature can speak to you.
Yeah,
And when you take things in the moment and stay in the present, which is not come naturally for me, that's when you notice nature and can participate in it instead of using it as a resource, as you say, or taking it for granted.
right.
So that's, I think, the dynamic that guides my day-to-day existence is I'll find myself thinking about 3 weeks from next Tuesday and all the things I have to do and everything to get there.
Right.
And it's like, okay, but you've worked that out. What are you going to do in the next hour?
Yeah,
How can you be present in the next hour
yeah,
with your students or with your garden or take my walk on my meditation trail?
right.
And you don't have to think past that. You've done the legwork. Now come back to the present. So I think that's it's harder for some people than others, but I think that would be my advice.
Well, that's very much Western culture, isn't it? The drive to just keep doing, 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 doing. So I think we who are of that culture, and I don't mean the American West, I mean as in European originated cultures were very much driven to do rather than be. And so your simple, very simple exercise of slow down, be where you are, observe where you are in the moment, be present in that moment is a really wonderful one. I like that. Um, I should also say to listeners, if anybody has questions for Carolyn, pop them in the chat. we've got another 5 minutes, so we can take advantage of that. Technically, we would end at 10:30, but what the heck, we have Carolyn here. Let's take advantage of that. So pop any questions or comments in the chat, and I am going to take a moment. This series is in support of my new book, Earthbound, and this is an actual physical copy of the book, which will not be out until Earthbound, A Year of Mindful Connection in Nature. The book will not be out until October. This is one of the 4 copies that the printer in Southeast Asia made up and had air shipped to the designer and editor and production manager and me so that we could check things like color reproduction and um, the layout in terms of how they manage this is called a full bleed when the photo goes all the way out to the edge. So it was just such a thrill to have this book appear on my doorstep as a book. It's such
And
a
we're going to be
beautiful,
talking
beautiful book.
about it on October 15th on my podcast and
Carolyn,
looking at it for a whole hour. I
yeah.
cannot wait for that.
So, and
It is gorgeous.
it
It is
has a
just
ribbon
gorgeous.
to mark your place. It's 52 weeks of practices, short essay meditations and practices on how to reconnect to nature in a spiritual way. So I just had to show it off because it's a book. This is my 14th book, and it's the one
It's
I'm
your
most
baby.
excited
It's your new
about.
baby.
It is, yeah. We're not supposed to have favorites, as authors, but this one is a favorite. So, um, I see no
I
question.
just wanted to say that I noticed the winter solstice. You showed us the winter solstice page, and Mariam Barry's on this call. And Mariam Barry is a poet and a poetry expert, and she is a regular contributor to my podcast. And what we've decided to do, she's on at other times too, but we mark the solstices and the equinoxes with a special episode of Poetry Sustains to
Yeah.
look at the poetry of those seasons. And it's one of my favorite things we do on the podcast. So,
I
and
have
Mariam
listened
does a
into
wonderful job.
those. I have listened into those. For winter solstice, the practice has a quote that's actually a quote from a Mary Chapin Carpenter song. Make a vow when solstice comes to find the light in everyone. That's from
I
a
know
Mary
from
Chapin
reading your
Carpenter song.
memoir that that's an important quote to you.
It is. It's a very important.
And if there's anyone out there who has not read Bless the Birds, very powerful memoir, please read the Earthbound and also do yourself a favor and read Susan's Bless the Birds.
Thank you. That was a hard memoir to write, but it was necessary. So the subtitle Living with Love, excuse me, in a Time of Dying sort of tells the whole thing. And oddly enough, it came out it came out during the pandemic, which is a very hard time to promote a book. Um, but it came out when it was needed because that was a time of dying. We are still in a time of dying. And so I think the subject, the idea of how we rise to our best selves in the hardest times we can imagine, is very, very germane. I wish it weren't so germane, but it is. So thank you for mentioning.
And how to use terraphilia to accomplish
Yeah,
that.
yes.
It all ties back to
Yeah.
that practice and that presence.
Yeah, it's very much about Earthbound, and that book are very much about terraphilia, as is the memoir I wrote before those, which is kind of the prequel, Walking Nature Home. So anyway, well, Carolyn, um, I have so I every time we talk, I so enjoy our conversations and I learn so much. So I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be an Earthbound Live conversationalist, and thank you for all of your wisdom and your heart. And the idea, I just want to go back to that, the idea that terraphilia means participation in the community of the earth. And that to do that on a daily basis, just where we are, we don't have to go somewhere that's incredibly scenic or has great wildlife migrations of some sort or whatever. In our everyday lives, we just have to slow down and remember to be present and to be part of that community, to give something back to the community as well as taking from it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And before we run out of time, I just want to invite anyone listening to join my Patreon community. It is
Yes.
free. And you just go to Patreon, Carolyn Crane and Whimsy Farm,
Yeah.
and then you will get periodic emails about podcasts and
Yes.
shows like this and other things. So please join me on Patreon. I would welcome it, and our community's growing, and I love that.
And of course, the replay for this will be on my Substack newsletter, and I will share it with Carolyn so she can share it on her Patreon community, which is how we help each other get along in this world as creatives who love the earth. So,
And we will see you on October 15th on the Whimsy Farm
yes, the
podcast.
Whimsy Farm podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Blessings.